It's funny how life has a way of handing you the truth wrapped in layers of deceit. A week ago, I was a man counting down the days to the happiest moment of my life. Today, I'm sitting on a beach meant for a honeymoon I'll never have, watching the waves carry away the remnants of a future I thought was mine. Let me tell you how it all came crashing down, and why, in the end, I'm strangely thankful it did. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Miller, just a guy who wanted a simple life. Give me a small house, a steady job, a good book on a quiet evening, and I'm good. But more than anything, I've always wanted a family. A home filled with love and trust. That's what I was working toward. And I thought I'd finally found it with Sophia. Sophia, she wasn't just my fiancée. She was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Kind, smart, beautiful, and full of life. She had this way of making me believe that, with her, I could have the life I'd always dreamed of. I trusted her completely, probably too much. But here's the thing about trust, it's a powerful thing. When you give it to someone, it feels like handing them a piece of yourself. And when they break it, it's like that piece shatters, leaving you with questions you never thought you'd have to ask. I won't lie to you, it's been a rough few days. The kind of days where you sit back and replay everything over and over in your head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. And maybe that's why I'm here, telling this story. Not because I'm looking for sympathy, but because I need to get this off my chest. To tell you how someone I thought was my blessing turned out to be one of the biggest lessons I'll ever learn. It all started about a week before the wedding. Up until then, everything had been normal, or at least, I thought it was. Sophia and I had been busy with last-minute preparations, confirming the guest list, checking on the venue, making sure the cake was exactly how we wanted it. You know, all the little things that go into making the day perfect. But then, out of nowhere, I started noticing something. Sophia started acting differently. She wasn't her usual self, the calm, thoughtful person I'd fallen in love with. She seemed tense. If I asked her a simple question, her answers felt short. When we sat down to discuss things about the wedding, she'd get this far-off look in her eyes, like she wasn't really there with me. She'd brush me off with, "It's fine," or "I'll take care of it," when normally, she'd love diving into the details together. At first, I told myself it was just stress. Weddings are stressful, right? Everyone says that. The planning, the pressure to make everything perfect, the expectations from family. It's enough to get under anyone's skin. So, I gave her space. I figured she'd talk to me when she was ready. But the red flags kept coming. Sophia was snappy, easily irritated over the smallest things. One night, we were sitting in the living room going over the seating chart, and I suggested moving a couple of guests around to make it more balanced. Normally, she'd agree or suggest something better. But this time, she just snapped. "Why do you have to overthink everything, Miller? Can't we just leave it how it is?" The way she said it, it caught me off guard. She'd never spoken to me like that before. Ever. I just sat there, looking at her. My first instinct was to push back, to ask what was really going on. But then I stopped myself. I've always been the type of person who believes in patience. If someone's upset, pushing them doesn't help. It just makes things worse. Besides, Sophia wasn't like this. She was kind, warm, understanding. This wasn't her, I told myself. This was the stress talking. So I stayed quiet. I thought, she'll tell me when she's ready. 3 days before the wedding, Sophia came to me looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She sat down, stared at the floor, and finally said, "I need to tell you something." I could tell it was bad, but I didn't say anything, just waited for her to continue. She started crying and told me she was being blackmailed. She said someone had a video of her from a girls' night out. She told me her friends had dared her to flirt with a man at a bar and do something silly to make everyone laugh. But it went too far when someone recorded it. Now, that person wanted money to keep the video private. I listened quietly, not interrupting. I didn't know what to say at first. My mind was racing. Why would she even do something like that? Why hadn't she told me earlier? When she finished, she looked terrified, waiting for me to yell or walk away. Instead, I took her hand and said, "It's okay. Don't worry about it. I'll handle this. She broke down even more, but this time it was like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Thank you, she kept saying. I was so scared you wouldn't understand. On the outside, I looked calm. I stayed quiet and kept my face steady. But inside, I was in pieces. I wanted to believe her story. I wanted to believe it was just a dumb mistake, one bad decision during a drunken night. But I know that someone who's about to get married doesn't do silly mistakes like this. Why would someone dare her to do something so extreme? Why did she wait until 3 days before the wedding to tell me? And why would the blackmailer even bother if it wasn't a big deal? I felt a knot in my chest. It wasn't anger. It was something else. Like an alarm in the back of my head, warning me that this wasn't the full story. I told myself to stay calm and think clearly. I couldn't jump to conclusions, but I also couldn't ignore how uneasy I felt. I needed to find out the truth, no matter what it was. Sophia thought I had forgiven her. I could see it in the way she relaxed, how she started smiling again. She even tried to make light of it, saying, I can't wait for all this stress to be over. We'll laugh about this one day. I smiled back, but inside, I knew this wasn't something I could laugh about. She thought we were stronger now, that this had brought us closer. But for me, it felt like the first sign that everything I believed about us was wrong. When something doesn't add up, it's like a crack in a wall. You can't see the whole damage right away, but you know it's there. And if you don't fix it, it only gets worse. I took a deep breath before calling the blackmailer later that day when I was alone. I wasn't even sure what to say at first. How do you talk to someone holding something so damaging? I decided to start simple, asking him straight up, how do I know you're not bluffing? There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a low chuckle. Then he said, you'll know soon enough. Moments later, my phone buzzed. It was a message with several video files attached. My heart was pounding as I opened the first one. Part of me wanted to stop right there, but I had to see it through. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The first video was hard to watch. Sophia wasn't stumbling around like someone who'd had too much to drink. She was steady, composed, and laughing. She wasn't just going along with the day, she was leaning into it. The man wasn't a stranger either. Their body language wasn't awkward or uncertain, it was familiar. I thought maybe that was the worst of it, but then I opened the next video. And the next. Each one made it clearer. This wasn't a single mistake. It wasn't some stupid, drunken night with her friends egging her on. These videos were from different days, different places, and all with the same man. I realized then that she hadn't told me the full truth. She'd only told me enough to make me think she was the victim of one bad decision. But this wasn't just one bad decision. This was a pattern, a secret life she'd been hiding from me for months. Then the final piece fell into place. I noticed the man's face was familiar. Not because I'd seen him before, but because Sophia had posted pictures of him on her Instagram stories. Nothing obvious, just group photos, little comments, but it was there. She followed him. He followed her. Their interactions in the comments were subtle but telling. I pieced it all together. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My mind was racing, but my emotions felt muted. She thought she could control the narrative, tell me a half-truth and move on. She underestimated me. Looking at those videos, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her, not yet. I wouldn't shout or cry or let her know how much it hurt. No, I was going to make sure she and her lover felt the weight of their choices. They thought they could do this in the dark, but I was about to turn on all the lights. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just hurt, it changes you. And in that moment, I changed. The next few days were surreal. We carried on with the wedding plans like nothing had happened. We picked out flowers, finalized seating arrangements, and even went cake tasting. Sophia looked relieved, even happy, thinking the worst was behind her. She had no idea I was sitting on the kind of truth that could destroy her entire life. I made sure not to slip up. I smiled when I needed to, nodded along during conversations, and stayed calm even when I felt like screaming. I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for me. I wanted her to feel secure because it made what I was about to do even more devastating. While Sophia was busy with last-minute dress fittings, I was busy planning my own moves. I scheduled the release of the videos strategically, not just to ruin her day, but to make sure the damage was public and irreversible. I uploaded the files to an anonymous account and set them to go live early in the morning on our wedding day. By the time the world woke up, her perfect image would be in pieces. And it wasn't just about Sophia. The man in the video, a high-level executive, a guy with a reputation built on being untouchable. I knew that when these videos hit, his career wouldn't just take a hit, it would crash and burn. The morning of the wedding, everything unfolded exactly as I'd planned. I was already awake and packed before Sophia even opened her eyes. Her phone started buzzing non-stop, calls, messages, notifications. At first, she was confused, groggy. Then I watched her face change as she picked up her phone and started reading. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, watching her piece it all together. Her hands started shaking as she scrolled through the messages, and when she looked at me, her face was pale. "What's happening?" she asked me, her voice barely a whisper. All I said was, "You should probably check social media." Then I walked out. By the time I left the house, the videos were everywhere. They'd been shared, reshared, and spread like wildfire. People were commenting, tagging, and messaging. Sophia's name, and his, were all over the place. I knew her reputation was destroyed. I knew his career was done for. And honestly, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. I blocked Sophia and her entire family on my way to the airport. I didn't need to hear their excuses or their pleas. I'd done what I needed to do. And as I boarded the plane, I felt something I hadn't felt in days: peace. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't yelling or fighting. It's walking away and letting the truth do the talking. I never thought I'd end up here, alone. This was supposed to be my honeymoon, a time filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a new beginning. Instead, it became something entirely different. And yet, in a way, it's exactly what I needed. I remember stepping off the plane and feeling like I'd walked into a postcard. The sand was soft under my feet, the water was impossibly clear, and the sunsets, well, they looked like paintings you'd find in a gallery. But none of it felt real. It was surreal, like I was watching someone else's life. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. For the first few days, I couldn't shake the anger. I kept replaying everything in my head. The lies, the betrayal, the way Sophia looked me in the eye and told me half-truths, thinking I wouldn't figure it out. I was furious, not just with her, but with myself. How did I not see it? How did I let it get this far? Anger, though, it's exhausting. At some point, I realized I didn't want to carry it anymore. That's when the solitude started to feel different. I wasn't just alone. I was free. Free from lies, free from doubt, free from wondering if the person I loved would ever truly choose me. There was a strange kind of peace in knowing I'd done the right thing. I could have stayed, pretended everything was fine, tried to rebuild something that was already broken. But I chose me. And walking away, that was the hardest and best thing I've ever done. Back home, Sophia's world was falling apart. The video went viral. It was everywhere. Friends, family, even people she barely knew saw it. She lost her job a week later. Her reputation was in shambles, and people she thought were close to her started keeping their distance. The man in the video, her lover, didn't escape either. He was a high-ranking executive at a big company. When the board found out, they cut him loose to save face. His career? Gone. His name? Dragged through the mud, just like hers. In some ways, it felt like justice. They both played with fire, and they got burned. But this isn't about revenge. It's about what comes after. For a while, I thought I'd lost everything. My dream wedding, my future, the woman I thought I knew. But I didn't lose anything worth keeping. I let go of what wasn't meant for me. And in doing that, I found something better: peace. Peace doesn't mean everything's perfect. It means I can look at myself in the mirror and know I chose what was right for me. It means I can rebuild, stronger this time, and only with people who deserve to be part of my life. Sometimes, you don't get the life you planned. But if you're lucky, you get the chance to start over and make something better. That's where I am now, starting over. And for the first time in a long time, I feel ready. So, now that you've heard my story, let me ask you this. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have confronted her the moment you noticed something was off? Would you have forgiven her after she came clean? Or, maybe, you'd have handled things differently entirely. Life throws us situations that test our patience, our character, and sometimes, our ability to walk away. I had to make a choice that wasn't easy, but it was necessary for my peace of mind. Looking back now, I don't regret it. If you think I made the right call, give this video a thumbs up. And if you know someone who might need to hear this, maybe they are stuck in a tough spot, or they are struggling to see the truth about someone in their life, please share this with them. You never know whose perspective it could change. Thanks for watching and for letting me share this part of my life with you. Take care, and remember, sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's knowing your worth.